Hi everyone, this is Afshana Afrin, your mentor at your FR mentor at being ACCA, and I am an ACCA affiliate and a rank holder in SPR. So today we will be speaking about the common mistakes which are made by ACCA FR students, right? And these are the mistakes which you guys should definitely avoid in order to get more than 50 marks. So without any further delay, let's start with the common mistakes and how can we potentially avoid these mistakes, right? So let's start poor use of workings and not showing calculations. So recently when I calculate or when I check the scripts of my students who have been enrolled for the test series, I found out that a lot of you guys are just entering the figures directly in the Excel sheet, right? Now, the entire point of giving you an Excel sheet is that you calculate on the sheet and you show it to the examiner the figures you have used. How did you arrive at that answer? The examiner needs to know the entire rundown of how did you arrive at that final figure, right? And if you just write the final answer, that is not going to earn you any marks. And the thing is that the main logic is that if you explain your workings properly, if you show which figure is from where and why have you used that figure, then you might get marks based on your steps. However, if you just directly write your one word answer, then if that's a wrong answer, then you're going to lose entire marks. So it's better that you show the workings in your sheet itself so that you can at least get working marks, right? You can get step markings, you can get own figure marks, right? So make sure you show your workings properly and don't just directly write the figures in your Excel sheet. Moving on to next mistake is that most of you, since this is F7 paper and there's not much priority given to remembering the standard names and numbers, it's not very necessary. However, if you do remember them, if you can write in your paper, that's quite good. However, if by chance during the exam, if you don't remember any accounting standard name or standard number, and please don't mention it in your exam, right? You might lose your marks over there, right? So instead of writing as per IFRS 16 property plant equipment, and if you remember it has IFRS 18, then you will lose your marks. So rather than making a mistake in your paper, just write as per the relevant standards, right? As per the relevant standard, this and that, right? So if you're unsure, don't do any guess games and just write as per the relevant standard. Okay, this is a common mistake and a lot of you guys have asked me about this, right? So moving on to next question, next mistake, not reading questions carefully or careless reading. Now it's quite understandable that in the exam scenario, you might get anxious, you might not read the question properly, or you might, not focus on the questions due to anxiety or, fear of missing out or fear of, not able to pass in between the exam. It does happen. So I need you to understand that the best way is that you relax, you read the questions carefully, and make sure you're putting your entire mind in the requested reading, right? Because there are key instructions given in the question. Like, for example, if they give you a ratio question, then it's high likely that they might ask you to use a specific format or maybe use a specific formula. Now, if you calculate the ratio not without that formula and you don't follow the instructions of the examiner, then your answer is wrong, right? If they ask you to follow debt to equity using a specific ratio, then you're supposed to follow that itself to get your answer correct, right? So make sure you read the instructions very carefully. If it says to exclude something, then make sure you exclude that. If it says to use a specific closing rate, then only use that rate in your answer sheet, right? If you use anything else, if you ignore the key instructions, then your solution is basically wrong, right? And make sure that once you read your question, you get an outline of your answer, and then you again recheck the requirements to make sure that whatever you have planned out is correct. And then you start writing your answer. Okay. Moving on to next point, consolidation, one of the most important thing. And what can possibly happen is that what can possibly happen is that you might forget to, time apportion the adjustments, or when you're making a statement of profit and loss account, and when the acquisition has happened in between the year, in that scenario, it's high likely that you might forget to time apportion the numbers. So make sure you are very careful in your reading. And at the beginning of the consolidation question itself, make a short note on who is acquiring who, when is the date, how many months into the year, and everything, right? So make sure you're very careful. And from the beginning itself, it's important you are very sharp. Right. So next is foreign currency translation. Now, what happens is that you're supposed to use a correct rate for each and every item, right? You might use a wrong exchange rate, then you might use a different closing rate for the items for translation. So again, if the rates are wrong, then it's high likely that you will lose your mark because your answer will be wrong. And there's also a scenario where they might ask you to translate non-monetary items. However, please remember that you cannot retranslate non-monetary items, and these are always to be measured at historical cost, because that's just accounting standard, right? You might get confused and you might remeasure land at a exchange rate, so that's completely wrong. And another tip is that you should show the rate used beside the calculation. Like, you can write the foreign currency in one column, next column you can also write the exchange rate, and the very next column you can show the calculation, right? That this is the presentation currency. Like, for example, from dinars, right? You want have one column for dinar, then you have the exchange rate, and then you have dollars. So that's a complete clear working. Okay, so you can easily show the rates you have used in your calculations. Okay, moving on to next one. Now, ratio calculation. Again, when I checked one of the paper recently, the question strictly mentioned that you are supposed to exclude deferred income in ratio calculation. However, there are some students who have used it, right? And if you use that figure in your calculation, that's basically wrong, right? So you lose your marks over there. That easy ratio calculation marks you're losing, that's not the right way. So it's important that you guys focus a lot in your exam and make a note of every tiny things there. It's mentioned, right? If you can't remember, then on your rough sheet, make sure you write down the points, right? Now, and also when you're calculating ratios, some of the students use unadjusted or maybe the wrong figures. Like, from the first section, they are in the theoretical part, they're using some other figure. So make sure that once you calculate the figures, then you use that figures accordingly in the relevant scenario. Okay, and make sure you are also double checking the figures for the ratio calculation, and anything just given, just make sure you double check everything. Okay, next is time management and ratio running out of time, basically. So over here, it's important that we have few days left before the exam. So it's important you give at least one mock, get it evaluated properly by a tutor. So, and you get proper feedback on how you can improve your performance, right? And by chance, and you're supposed to stick to the relevant marks, minutes you have decided per mark, right? Per mark. Because, example, at being ACCA, we believe that we should, allocate 1.6 minutes per mark, so that later on you have at least, like, 10-15 minutes at the before the exam close time, right? So you can review your answers. So make sure that you give proper time marks in proper exam scenario, and you do proper time management. And when you're giving a mock exam, make sure you note down the time you're taking for each and every question, right? And trust me, you might have time management issues, but then just remember that once you pass the limit for one specific question, please skip to the next question. Because if you don't skip to the next question, then you're missing out the opportunity to earn marks in the next question, right? Each and every question will have a difficult scenario and a easy scenario. So if you're stuck on a difficult scenario and if you waste your time over there, then you're losing out the easy marks on the easier scenario, right? So make sure you properly allocate your time. And another thing which I forgot is that when you're doing ratio interpretation, then make sure you're giving proper headings. You're able to refer to the specific ratios, right? Make sure you're able to link your calculations and the case, right? Give proper headings, make it easier for the examiner to understand how you have arrived at the conclusion, right? And yes, next point is wasting time. Now, again, in the answer script evaluation, I noticed that a lot of the students were manually selecting each and every cells when they want to add up something or calculate something, or if you want basically don't waste your time by adding the cells one by one. Instead, please use the Excel formulas, right? Is equal to some formulas available in your exam, and make sure you're using that formula in itself, and don't waste your time clicking on the cells one by one. Okay, this will help you to reduce your errors, maintain neatness, and minimize the time taken, right? So make sure you follow and take maximum benefit of the Excel which you are being provided with. Right. And the very next, last point is that please don't memorize any theory. And even if you're memorizing any theory, please don't just write copy paste in your exam sheet. You will not earn any mark. Okay. So whatever theory you have learned, try and relate it to the scenario, and then you're supposed to give a proper, nice paragraph. Right. So link to the scenario is very important. Anything you have mug up, which you have memorized, if you have just you learned from Kaplan kit and you're writing in your exam sheet, trust me, that's not going to work. Make sure you give your inputs, right? Link the numbers to the scenario, and that's how you can easily earn marks in the ratio question, which is very essential, right? So avoid textbook paragraphs, explain the impact on the given entity itself, right? Don't learn anything and don't just copy paste your answers from here and there. So these are the common mistakes which are made by F7 students, and I hope you guys get to learn something new from this. And we are only a few days away from the exam session, so all the very best. And I hope you guys are practicing and making the best out of your time. Thank you for watching.